Listen to these two sentences. I did my homework. The school did away with homework. What do you think? Do both of those sentences have the same verb in them? If you answered yes, you just got tripped up by a phrasal verb. And bam, right there in that sentence, I used yet another phrasal verb, tripped up. It means to make a mistake or to cause someone to make a mistake. If you haven't realized it already, phrasal verbs are very common in informal spoken English. They can be tricky because they tend to be idiomatic in nature. And what I mean by that is that the meaning of the phrasal verb cannot always be determined by looking at the meaning of its parts. Therefore, you can get taken down by these if you don't know exactly what they mean. Did you see what I did there? I used yet another phrasal verb. I'm telling you, they are everywhere. They are efficient, they are versatile, and that is what makes them so powerful. So much so that I have decided to create a whole series just about these fascinating phrasal verbs. And today's video is the first in that series. Knowing the meaning of phrasal verbs can massively up your language game, both in terms of what you're able to understand and in terms of how natural and fluent and au courant your spoken language sounds. So if you are interested in leveling up your English, make sure you stick around and watch the entire video. In fact, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of my videos. There are thousands of phrasal verbs in English. In today's video, we are going to focus on 6 phrasal verbs that include the humble 2-letter verb do. Hello, language lovers and language learners and intellectually curious folks everywhere. Welcome back to my channel. So let's go back to my original question because I haven't answered it yet. Do these 2 sentences have the same verb? I do my homework. The school did away with homework. The answer, if you haven't realized it by now, is a big emphatic no. Even though they both contain the verb do, that is not the whole story. In sentence 1, I do my homework. Yes, the verb in that sentence is do, as in I complete my homework, I finish my homework, I work on my homework. But in sentence 2, the school did away with homework. The verb is actually a phrasal verb, do away with. That is our first example of a phrasal verb using the word do. Before we talk about what this phrasal verb means and look at some other examples, let us discuss 5 fundamental things to know about phrasal verbs in general. As the name suggests, phrasal verbs are idiomatic expressions in which the action is conveyed not by one word, but by a phrase. And a phrase is essentially a collection of words, bigger than one word and smaller than a complete sentence. Typically, phrasal verbs tend to be 2 or 3 words long. Phrasal verbs can either be separable or inseparable. And this is going to make a lot more sense when we look at the examples. But for now, what I'm going to say is a phrasal verb has multiple parts to it, right? Sometimes it can be 2 words, sometimes it can be 3 words. In a separable phrasal verb, those parts can be separated from one another and other words can get inserted in between, okay? If a phrasal verb is inseparable, that means that unit, whether it's 2 words, whether it's 3 words, that stays together and nothing can go in between the words that make up that phrasal verb. Number 3, we talked about this already. Most phrasal verbs tend to be idiomatic, which means you need to know the meaning. You're not going to be able to figure it out just by looking at the parts that make up the phrasal verb. Of course, you can use context to figure it out, yes, but just looking at the parts that make up the phrasal verb is not always going to help you. Phrasal verbs are used in informal spoken contexts. So you want to stay away from these if you are doing more formal communication. It could be a formal speech. It could be reports, whether they're academic reports, school essays. You want to stay away from these because these are considered informal, spoken English. So as we go through and we look at examples, I will give you alternate ways of saying the same thing using vocabulary that could be used in a formal setting, in a more academic, professional setting. Okay, so let's look at the first example, all right? So this is from our sentence at the beginning of the video. The school did away with homework. And we already said that the verb in this sentence is not the word do, rather it is the phrase do away with. This is an inseparable phrasal verb. That means do away with always has to be used as that unit. It cannot be broken apart. Other things cannot be inserted in between. So one meaning of this phrasal verb is to abolish, to eliminate. So in our example, the school did away with homework. What we're saying is the school eliminated homework. They abolished homework. Maybe there was a change in policy and they said, homework doesn't help. We are abolishing it. We are eliminating it. Here's another example. The company decided to do away with single-use containers and encourage reusable alternatives. So what we're saying here is that the company eliminated the use of single-use containers. We can say the company decided to abolish the use of single-use containers and encourage reusable alternatives. Okay, so in both those examples, the second sentence could be a sentence you use in more professional, academic, formal settings. The phrasal verbs would be in a spoken, informal setting. Oh, and here's another thing I forgot to mention earlier. Each phrasal verb can have different meanings. The same phrasal verb can mean different things in different contexts. So, do away with, in addition to meaning abolish or eliminate, can also mean to kill or murder. So we could say the deranged man did away with his father. The deranged man killed or murdered his father. I guess in a way it does mean to eliminate, but in a very permanent and violent way. Phrasal verb number 2, do with. Before we look at some examples, I want you to recognize that there is a phrasal verb, a version of that, do with, and you could see those two words together in a sentence, but they are not necessarily being used as a phrasal verb. I'll tell you what I mean. Take a look at this sentence. What do I do with this? Do with, right? They appear right next to each other, but in that context, it is not a phrasal verb. The verb in that sentence is do. And you are asking, well, how do I use this? What do I do with it? Literally, what do I do with it? Do I cut with it? Do I write with it? What do I do with it? Okay, so in that context, that is not a phrasal verb. Here is an example of do with being used as a phrasal verb. The argument had to do with the issue of off-leash dogs. What does that mean? It means pertaining to, relating to, related to, about. Okay, so an alternate way of saying that would be the argument pertained to the issue of off-leash dogs. So that is one meaning of the phrasal verb do with. There are a couple of, what's the best way to put this? There are a couple of variations of this that have other words added into it, and they create different meanings as well. So let's take a look at a couple of those. The argument had nothing to do with the issue of off-leash dogs. So this is pretty straightforward. If you know do with means related to, pertaining to, nothing to do with will probably mean not related to. And that's exactly what it means. So in this example, the argument had nothing to do with the issue of off-leash dogs. So you could say the argument didn't pertain to the issue of off-leash dogs. Here's another way you could use that phrasal verb, and it means something quite different. Since their big fight, the brothers have had nothing to do with each other. That means shunning someone, avoiding someone, not wanting to have any connection or relationship with someone, severing ties. So we could say that same thing in a more formal setting by saying, since their big fight, the brothers have severed ties with each other. Okay, so we talked about do with, pertaining to. We talked about nothing to do with, not pertaining to. And then we also talked about nothing to do with, as in severing ties, shunning, avoiding. Okay? But do with has yet another meaning, and that is to want, to need. Okay? So here's an example. If I say, I could really do with some ice cream right now, what am I saying? I'm saying, I would love to eat some ice cream right now, or I'm really craving ice cream. I would love to have some ice cream. Okay, so same phrasal verb, but look at how many different ways it can be used. This is what I mean by they're very versatile and very efficient and therefore very powerful. Phrasal verb number 3, do over. This is also separable, so things can get inserted between the do and the over. When I say things, what kinds of things get inserted? Pronouns and nouns are typically inserted in between. So let's look at an example. After the match, the kids cried foul and demanded a do-over. Okay, so in this case, what it means is somebody wants a redo of something. Somebody wants to repeat something, but not just repeating it, but nullifying whatever came before and doing it over. Again, fresh, clean slate. All right? So if we wanted to say that sentence in a more formal setting, you would say something like, after the match, the kids cried foul. They demanded that the results be nullified and that the match be played again. Okay, so you see how efficient that do-over is? That conveyed all those other things. We had to create a couple different sentences. We had to add a lot of words to get that same meaning across. Here's another example. She was unhappy with the way her paper turned out and decided to do it over. Okay, so in this case, do you see how the pronoun it ended up between do and over, right? This is what I mean by it is separable. Those two parts can be separated. They don't always have to be separated, but they can be separated. In a formal setting, you would say something like, she was unhappy with the way her paper turned out and decided to rewrite it. Here's another meaning of the phrasal verb do over. It can mean to redecorate an object, a space, like we are doing our kitchen over. Or you could also say we're doing over our kitchen. What does that mean? We are remodeling, we are redecorating our kitchen. It can also be used to talk about people. So a makeover, right? A do-over, a makeover, a transformation of some sort. So an example could be, the stylist did him over completely. The stylist completely transformed his appearance. Phrasal verb number 4, do without. This is inseparable, which means nothing can go in between do and without. Okay? Here is one thing do without means. Give something up, to live without something, to work without something, to make do without something. So here's an example. In order to simplify her life, she did without luxuries and focused on the essentials. In a more formal setting, we would say, in order to simplify her life, she chose to live without luxuries and focused on the essentials. Do without can also mean to disapprove of something or someone. So here is an example. I could do without the extra work. I would rather not do the extra work. So first one, more informal. Second one can be used in more formal settings. Here's another example that parents out there can probably relate to really well. I could do without that attitude, young man or young woman, said every parent of a teenager at least once a day. Phrasal verb number 5, do in. This is also separable. One meaning of the phrasal verb do in is to tire or to exhaust. So you could say That 5-mile run really did me in. Okay, we separated out the do and in, and we inserted a pronoun. The 5-mile run really did me in. In a more formal setting, you would say, the 5-mile run exhausted me. Do in also means another thing. Surprise, surprise. It can also mean to kill or murder someone. Okay, we already looked at one phrase, do away with. We already looked at one that has this meaning. Here's another one, do in, doing someone in. Okay, here's an example. The man threatened to do in the members of the jury when he was found guilty. In a formal setting, you would say, the man threatened to kill the members of the jury when he was found guilty. Phrasal verb number 6, the last one we're going to review today. Do well to. This is inseparable. That stays as a unit. Do well to. Nothing can go in between. And what does it mean? It means it will be a good idea. It's advisable. It is recommended. It will be to your advantage. Here are some examples. You would do well to avoid him right now. It will be a good idea for you to avoid him right now. That would be more formal. He would do well to get an internship before he graduates. It would be beneficial for him to get an internship before he graduates. Okay, so we looked at 6 different phrasal verbs, all of them using the word do, and we looked at 10, 12 different meanings that those 6 phrasal verbs can have depending on the context. Remember, these are idiomatic, so you just have to learn what they mean and start listening for them and start using them so you really get comfortable with them. And here's what I want you to do. As you're going about your day, listening to English in all different contexts, hopefully, I want you to really tune your antenna to pick up on phrasal verbs. Okay? And you will sooner, you know how it is? Like when you start noticing something or when you notice something, then all of a sudden you start seeing it everywhere. Like I remember when I was trying to figure out what car to buy and I was thinking of a Nissan Rogue. I don't think I'd ever seen a Nissan Rogue before. One time I rented it and so I was, I liked it. And then afterwards, they were everywhere. They had always been everywhere, but my brain had filtered them out, right? So phrasal verbs are everywhere. Your brain might be filtering them out right now, but as soon as you tune your antenna, you're going to start picking up on those and you're going to realize how ubiquitous they are. They're everywhere, used all the time. Okay, so that is your homework, to try and tune your antenna and start picking up on those phrasal verbs that are all around you. Next week, we're going to revisit these same 6 phrases, but you are going to put your knowledge to the test. Hopefully between now and next week, you're going to be practicing, you're going to be listening, you're going to just feel much more comfortable. And when we come back next week, you are going to take a quiz and hopefully you're going to do amazingly well because you're going to have prepared for it. If you find my videos helpful and interesting, please make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any videos I post. As always, thank you for watching and I will see you next time.